So let's say you've got a situation where you got a business domain that has business problems, and you've got a few teams that are all serving those problems. So first of all, in the parlance of team topologies, you've got a stream-aligned team who's talking directly to that business domain. But the stream-aligned team obviously can't do everything, so they've got a couple of platform teams they're talking to. And so to solve any one of the problems that the business gives to the stream-aligned teams, stream-aligned team has some work to do, platform team has some work to do, and another platform team has some work to do. So worst case scenario, this one problem decomposes into 3 PBIs, and they're dependent. So to get an answer to that or a solution to that thing, you have to have this team do some work, this team do some work, this team do some work. 2-week sprints, that's 6 weeks. That's a long feedback cycle. You could run
they
them
have
in parallel.
to. Are you saying they have to do it in sequence? Like one has to do it, then the next, then the next, or they can do it? Can they do it in parallel?
Well, best case scenario, they could do some of it in parallel, but it's also risky. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Sometimes it doesn't speed you up. Let's assume for the purposes of the question, having all of these dependencies, let's say they want really quick turnaround. Really, that's really the problem they're trying to solve. So even if it's a week, right, where the team's working in parallel, it would take too long. You look pained, Mike.
I'm confused why that would suddenly take too long. What do you mean by that?
Well, let's say they have things that they need to turn around in a matter of a day, right? And in order to do that, coordinating amongst 3 teams in the normal process of having PBIs in each team, this team has to do this before the other team can even see it, right? So that's at least a day. It's a coordination problem that I'm getting at. So another way, so instead of running PBIs through the normal Scrum process, and you've got a Scrum of Scrums and all that stuff, the coordination at that, the layer above. Have you ever seen teams who say, just based on the urgency of this request and how we need this stuff so quickly, we're going to take some people from this team and this team and this team and put them together in sort of an ensemble.
You're going to create a tiger team.
You're going to create a tiger team, a war room, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Along with people from whoever can define the problem and accept the solution. We're going to carve out some capacity from each one of these 3 teams, have them meet for an hour a day.
So you're going to break the platforms. You're going to create an actual cross-functional team that has all the capabilities to solve this cross-functional problem.
Yes.
Okay. So, wow, what a crazy concept. I have no idea why anyone would ever think that would be a good idea.
Interesting.
So the thing is, I would definitely consider it, and I would also consider it a prototype for a different way of arranging the teams. Like if they did that and it was successful, what would keep them from ever needing to do that again?
What would keep them from ever needing to do that again? Better planning up front so that they didn't get so close to an unmovable date without buffer.
So this was self-inflicted?
This is self-inflicted on the system.
But it was self-inflicted before the situation arose. Because the platform aligned teams, the platform aligned teams is a flawed model to begin with. It's from a cross-functional rapid delivery standpoint. The way that you guys had to handle that was have enough lead time that you could execute it sequentially.
Yeah, totally. But let's say the lead time has expired.
Yeah.
And now you're staring at the date.
Right. So now you've got
in the corner.
Now you got no choice but to pull this.
Yep. It's all about maximizing or shortening the feedback cycle, shortening the cycle times really on the solution. Let's say nobody wants to be in this position. Like obviously we'll manage it going forward, hypothetically, by having better design discussions up front, well and ahead of any unmovable date. But let's say you're in a system where you're at, and you have to speed up. What would be Is that worth trying even?
Well, first of all, let's just ask this. Do you think it can work?
I've seen it work.
Okay, then it's worth trying.
Okay.
So, I mean, if the outcome is what you're trying to get to, right? You want the outcome to be, we deliver this by this date. Yeah. You could even go to the stream-aligned teams or the platform teams and say, we're putting a band together that's just going to work on this. Do we have any volunteers?
You'll make the curtains. My mom can make the stage.
Do we have any volunteers? Right. And see if you can pull people voluntarily into that team, because you can obviously, this team needs to gel quickly. So wanting to be there or aligned around the purpose is probably going to be helpful. So, getting a volunteer army in place is probably a good start.
Aptitude and interest is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And chemistry, honestly. Yeah. If you've got people that have worked together, that can make it, because we all know that a team full of superstars doesn't necessarily lead to success, because look at the White Sox. Anyway, I digress.
We had a situation when I was back at way back at one company, when I was actually leading the development teams and we were trying to be agile. We had teams that could do things, and a big opportunity arose that didn't fit into the normal backlog work stream. It just, did I just zoom in on myself?
Yeah, you sure did.
Yeah. All right. So this opportunity comes up that we need to work together in order to accomplish this. And there's no room in the flow. We all the teams are committed for the sprint. They're all in for the long haul. We still needed to get this thing done, and we formed a tiny team. We said, what is the minimum number of people we would need to get this done? And we plucked people from among the teams to do that. And it was it was actually a 3-person team. And the 3-person team was asked to estimate the work. And I had, by this time we were doing story pointing, and I could pretty much predict what people were going to guess the sizes were. So I had guesstimated what I thought it was. And I said, that's going to be like 14, 15 points total to get the whole thing done. And the project manager went, well, that's going to take like 3 sprints to get done. And I went, no, it's not. They'll get it done in 1. And they're like, no, that's not possible, because the big teams can only do 15 and there's only 3 people on that team. There's no way they can do. It's like, watch them. It's going to happen. And this small group got together, decided on a strategy, figured out how they were going to work together. And they actually did it in off hours. They didn't take them off the teams. They did it on their own, and then they offered them incentive for doing it. And they did an off calendar. I don't know, off time, whatever the time. Anyway, they worked on their own time, and they pulled this thing together and did it in 2 weeks. And it was, 3 people, 15 points in 2 weeks. And then you were looking at a full team that was doing 19 points in 2 weeks. And you're going, what's the disconnect here? It's like alignment.
Why don't we just make the whole airplane out of the black box?
Why are we still running it that way when we could be running this thing? And then, it became an interesting question. But that was actually a really cool example of what you're describing. Now,
did they use the Ensemble mob programming model, or did they just they use the same sort of methods just off hours?
No, actually, what they didn't do mob programming. They did pairing. They did selective pairing, because they basically said we aren't going to have time for a whole review cycle on the code, so we want to minimize the amount of, and we had requirements to do code reviews, so we minimized the need for off-cycle reviews by doing pair programming. So
the review was happening in real time.
Exactly. And so they worked together as necessary, right? For 90% of the work, they were working together, but it came to a point where they said, you know what, this part, let's divide and conquer on.
Yeah.
Right. and then they separate it, and we'll come back in and they put a limit on it. They time boxed their alone time. Like the default was work together. The alone time was the time box to keep, right?
It sounds like real agility to me as opposed to executing a framework.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the tester was standing by looking over everyone's shoulder and figuring out how the tests were going to get done. And as soon as something was like, okay, let's post this. You can test this. And he'd run off and come back and say, okay, this worked, this didn't work. It's like, okay, fix it.
Okay. Yeah. This was just an interesting thought experiment that came to me from somebody else who's asking. And I think, what you're saying is that it's worth trying. But it sets up in the minds of people like, well, if this is so much faster, we could be doing. Why wouldn't we do this?
Right.
And I think that's a great question. Why aren't you doing it all the time?
Right. So
maybe you should seriously consider it, not just when you're like frantic about a date.
Yeah. So whatever you're going to call this team, we called them the Gray Wolves, and there was a reason for that. But I think I've heard it referred to as a tiger team. But if you're going to you bring this team together for one opportunity, and then theoretically it succeeds, and then do you disband that team, or do you let them stay together and give them more problems to solve? And then you start. So if there's enough of this type of work that would allow that team to persist, right, then you start getting that. You're setting that mindset with people going, why is this the only team that operates this way?
It potentially really runs roughshod over your change management if you're trying to set up teams and like manage teams. It's just change is disruptive, right?
Yeah.
And so that's good and bad.
You're going to leave a hole behind them, right? The other teams are going to have to accommodate the fact that they've lost some folks.
Yes.
And depending on how strong those teams are, they could weather the absence of an individual or two.
Or maybe you don't necessarily take these teams out and make a new team out of them. Maybe you say the people who need to be involved on this team and this team and this team have a certain amount of capacity during the sprint.
Careful.
To go to these meetings.
Just be careful. Because now you're dividing your resource, and so they have to decide where they're going to spend their time.
That's a slippery slope.
So the reason this worked for us is because these people committed to doing it. They would still do their day job, and then they did this as extra work.
But that's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable
over the long haul.
Although the remuneration was quite good for them to do.
So you're saying if I'm one of these people on one of these three teams and I'm being asked to go do this other thing, it's not enough of a firewall to say it's a third of my capacity or half my capacity during the sprints. It's scheduled to these times and days during the sprint, and the rest of the time I'll work on stuff from the main sprint backlog. You're saying that's inherently unstable. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And there would be okay.
You're going to run into situations. What this devolves into is then you're going to have prioritization issues. Well, then what am I working on?
Yeah.
Because if a person is divided between two or God forbid, three teams, three delivery functions, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Dividing their time produces a conflict. Okay, so now what takes the priority? I've only got X number of hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No matter how much I'm getting paid for those extra hours.
Well,
yeah.
And so what's first? And inevitably something's going to have to come second. And we know from everything that we've learned and taught and everything and coached that when a person divides their time amongst three very different things, there's that tax.
Yeah.
But how is it different from doing support? Like, let's say I'm on a Streamline team and I build software and I deliver to the thing. And we know that sometimes there's a production defect, and the best people to solve the production defect is the people who did the code. So you can assume that most of the capacity is going to be on new stuff, but some of it is going to be on fixing our own bugs. And so, but we don't have the bugs yet. We don't know when they're going to come up. So we just set aside a certain amount of capacity to fix production support bugs and most of other. How is it not just like that?
Well, because it's not, you can do that in your team. Your streamlined teams can still address that work, but this is you're forming a new team. You're forming an
No, I don't think I'm forming it. So that's exactly what we're not doing. We're forming a working group, but these people would stay aligned on their own.
No. So you're forming a team. The system, fine. You're forming a system that we could represent as a team. That collective is not going to work unless they can coordinate to each other, which means they're going to act as a team. They're going to act as a team in addition to the team they're already on. If you want it done fast, you're going to have to do it that way.
So this new group that you're saying is a team is not going to have their own planning process. It's not going to have their own retrospective process.
They will. They should.
Well, within the 1 hour a week, sure, absolutely.
You think you're going to pull this off in an hour a week? I mean, you said that this is a cycle time thing that has to get done in a very short period of time, and it's going to it would normally take you 3 sprints to get through it. You want to get it done in less time.
If they ran it through the process of the existing sort of Agile release train, let's say.
Well,
that was bounded that required you to go through the planning and the review cycle that's in the sprint, the 2-week sprint cycle. That's what they're trying to avoid in the question.
How are they going to
So we're not talking about setting up separate teams with separate charters and separate roles and separate.
See, you're adding a level. You're adding a level of overhead to the word team that I'm uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
I never mentioned team.
Yeah, I know.
If I said team.
I did. And then you went, when I said team, you said this means charters and overhead and planning and.
What does team mean if it doesn't have a charter and a set of roles and responsibilities?
If you get a bunch of kids out on a playground and they pick up a basketball and they say, let's play basketball together. They divide up into teams, right?
Yeah,
they don't form a charter. They don't develop a logo. They don't get a coach, and they don't sit down and have planning strategy meetings. They pick up the damn ball and they play. So,
but we're not
talking
about basketball.
Teams.
We're talking about software.
They're still teams.
Yeah, I guess I don't see how it's a useful distinction because the team, what a team here is pretty well defined.
So that word is loaded.
It seems to be loaded.
It can be as lean and minimal as you want, or you can load a whole ton of stuff on there. Charters and missions and blah, 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 blah. And you can call them both teams, but the reality is one's going to be able to move a lot faster than the other one that's loaded down with all this. Oh, for a team, then my God, we have to have a charter. Hey, how about this? The mission is to get the shit done. We already know what we're supposed to get done.
Pick up the ball.
Yeah. Let's get it done. That's the mission. So let's dispense with all this whole charter crap. I'm not saying charters are generally crap, but for big initiatives, that's fine, whatever, if that's what you feel like you need to have. But you can form a team, a small, nimble team, without a whole lot of the trappings of, we got an organization here and we got it.
Yeah. So it's a definitional thing. So when I hear team, I hear a long-lived group of people who expect to service a long-lived flow of valuable problems to solve. And what I'm saying is this isn't that. This is a group of people who have a very short-lived set of problems that is going to end soon. So it doesn't make sense to charter them. The whole point is we need a couple hours of their time a week. And really, I guess my question was more about the Ensemble programming. Does the Ensemble programming thing work across, even if you're pulling people from multiple different teams?
You're not going to, unless the problems you're giving them are 2 hours long, you're not going to get any benefit out of doing this for 2 hours a week.
Well, that's a different question. Yeah. So can they actually go from problem to solution?
You're pre-limiting the capability of this group. You don't want to call it a team.
Unless you assume they can't ship a change in an hour. Yes, I agree.
Well, that's what I said. One of the unless the problem can be completed in that span of time.
Yeah.
So then you're talking about, this is like doing a FedEx day.
Do you guys think it's a good idea or a bad idea, or just there's risks?
Well, see, the thing is there's a good idea in there, but I keep hearing the trappings you're placing around it as not being conducive to the helping.
What are the trappings?
So if you say that, like you're basically saying, I'm not gonna create a real structure that's going to do this work. So now we're coming to, let's define what the work is then. Because if the work is so brief that you could do this by sitting a couple people down for an hour or two, just do that. Get a bunch of people, say, hey, you. We've talked to your scrum masters. We've confirmed that you've got some spare capacity. We hope you've got the will. We're gonna get you pizza over lunch for a day, and we ask you to get together and solve that problem for us. I mean,
this is exactly what this person's talking about.
All right. So you can
using the Ensemble pattern.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And that, so when you, maybe I made a bad assumption. I assume that you were talking about actually a big problem that, because you had started with, it's going to take 3 sprints to get it done if we do it the other way.
I meant one with 3 sprints for one change that has to go through the process as in the typical art structure.
I also have a very
cross-cut through that.
I also have a strong question about, does this, when you say through the art structure, is it impossible to deliver a story early? Do you have to wait to the end of a sprint to deliver your piece of a story? So does team 1, even though they might spend this much time on it, has to wait this long to deliver it? And then the next team starts their sprint, and even though they do work on it for this long, they have to wait this long to deliver it. And then the third team picks it up, and then even though they take this long, they have to wait this long to deliver it. You've got a problem in your delivery process.
You just exposed a major flaw in the process right there.
Yeah, that entirely could have been done as in one coordinated sprint. Team A is going to take on part 1 of this, finish it in a day, and hand it off to Team B. Team B is going to then take on their piece of it and pass it on to Team C, and we're going to deliver this thing on day 4.
So maybe they go to daily scrum of scrums.
Yes.
And just amp up the coordination within the existing.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. They don't have daily scrum of scrums?
Most people don't.
Let's say that. No.
Let's say they do. For something like that, we say there's a need for a scrum of scrums coordination of a higher fidelity than the several times a week that we've been doing.
Maybe instead of an hour a week, they go to 15 minutes a day or something like that.
If they're spending good God. An hour a week is purgatory. Why are they doing an hour a week? They should just, if they're doing an hour a week, you can do 15 minutes a day. That's probably a better model.
That would be better. That's what I hear you say.
Yeah. I would never go to an hour a week scrum of scrums. What the hell are you talking about?
You know what they call a group of Agile coaches?
An argument?
An argument. This is why people get frustrated when they look at Agile coaches. It's like they're all right, but they disagree.
All right. So, and to be fair, whatever the situation you're in or the organizational structure
it's not
that you're
me.
dealing with, or whoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever this organizational structure is, it got to where it is through history and incremental change. And that's where they are. So your proposal here, or your
thought experiment.
Yes, your thought experiment is presuming a structure of some complexity that we're already living in. So given the players are in this complex state, how can we possibly solve this problem? And so if we want to it's a small problem that pops up every now and again, then doing your delivery on a different cadence. And you should be, if it's a hot job, if this is something that's such a big deal that we need to interrupt the flow of work, then
but nobody said that.
Well, but I mean, then why couldn't you schedule it just in the normal course of time? What's the urgency? What's the sense of urgency?
The Ensemble programming pattern would probably be faster, would be lower your cycle times. The problem is the people who serve on the Ensemble would have to come from multiple teams. That's the essence.
Again, but you're not describing an ensemble here. You're describing team 1 takes their thing and does their part and then passes it on to team 2.
No. I'm saying that's the existing process that has longer cycle times. I'm saying that the proposal is you pull a couple people from each team and they form a group, a working group, and they use Ensemble programming in that
for a couple of hours.
Time blocks.
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
You know, I think that it depends on the problem. And if your drive is, we need to reduce cycle times, that's good to identify. Bottom line, regardless of whether you call it an ensemble or a team or whatever it happens to be, I think this is an ideal opportunity to almost set up a reference model. So this team, I'll call them a team. You have them do this, and you show, because the expectation, let's say, what is the expected outcome? Like we do it with any experiment. What is the expected outcome? We have a theory. Let's experiment on that theory.
Yeah.
We believe that we can reduce cycle time by blah, blah, blah. And this is how we're going to do this. And the expected outcome is that we will have a shorter cycle time. And you run that experiment.
Yep.
And then you try to replicate that. You know,
yes.
Once does not constitute.
Technically, it's a hypothesis, but 100%. Yes.
Right, a hypothesis. And so you run that a couple of times, and after a couple of times, you find 2-3 times, hey, this actually is working as we expected. That becomes your reference model, right? Then you can choose to either disband them or begin to ask, well, how come the rest of the organization isn't able to do this? And would it be beneficial to expand the experiment to, let's have 3 or 4 more teams or whatever you call them to do this. This is a way to challenge whatever model that you're working in. So,
yeah, it's enormously disruptive.
You've adopted SAFe, and or whoever this is, and they've got these agile release trains. There is nothing that says, well, we have to abide by the way this is the structure. If there is a better way to reduce those cycle times and deliver value faster, who cares whether it abides by the art way or whatever? Who cares?
Yeah. Totally. Okay, cool. I feel like we've solved it. Thank you, gentlemen.
The man always looking for a solution.
Yeah, the man always declaring victory before the battle has begun. All right, so here's you've got this model you put in place. You get the people to say, hey, look, that worked. Let's try that again. Hey, it worked again. Hey, try it again. Somebody's going to eventually make the decision, hey, that's an interesting concept. Could we expand it? I will bet you any money that comes from the team before it comes from leadership. That the team is going to start saying, why are we working the other way when we could be working this way? And they may start trying to replicate that themselves within the team.
Is that something you'd build into the hypothesis to test?
Don't know if I would build it into the hypothesis. I would let the team form that hypothesis and start acting on it. I wouldn't impose that. You created this structure as a demonstration to solve an immediate need. Don't let it go to waste.
Yeah, makes sense.
In the outcome of an experiment, you're going to get intended consequences and unintended consequences. And if you start trying to build too much complexity into the hypothesis, you're going to either invalidate the experiment or just make it just so cumbersome. So I would say make your hypothesis and your desired outcome as simple as possible. Our objective is to reduce the cycle time. There are going to be hopefully there will be side benefits. And to Mike's point, the team may discover, hey, this works pretty well, and talk to their 2 friends and their 2 friends and blah, 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 blah.
Correct.
And then but that's a side benefit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so you don't scribe it into the official hypothesis.
I wouldn't.
That it's just something you keep an eye out for to see if it happens.
Yeah, and when you close the experiment, I don't know if people really ever do that. I do. Let's retrospect. What did we learn out of this experiment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there are going to be things that we learned that, hey, I never even thought about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
no, you should definitely capture the learning. That's for sure.
Right. So have the group come together to have a conversation about how that went after the fact, see what they might do differently. I don't know. There's a word for that, but you're shying away from using that word. So
okay, well, it's some amount of minutes since we started. I feel like we have.
It's definitely been minutes.
Hit the time box.
So this has been an Agile thing.
It feels like it.
Well, then I'm Jeff Singleton.
I'm Mike Markey.
I've been Matt Beam. See you next time. Thanks, everybody.